Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the Mental Health Gaming Podcast. I'm Bradley and I'm back from some terrible audio issues last week, and I'm joined by my good friend Stu, who managed to make the podcast somehow listenable. How you doing, Stu?
Not too bad. It's been a funny week because this is my last week in work. Friday is my last day, so lots of different emotions, but I'll talk about those in detail next week. But other than that, not too bad.
Excellent. So, a weird week actually. It's been a slow one for me, and not overly much to talk about until a certain mouthpiece from the States that wasn't Donald Trump decided to open his mouth this week, and we'll cover that one a bit. But before then, as usual, what have we been playing?
An absolute huge amount. So it's really weird. We've been on a few of the podcasts and I've not played much. And then I played a ton. And then we had a special episode where we didn't talk about what we've been playing. So there's a backlog to talk about, but I'll just talk about the sort of high points. So we'll talk about the least interesting to the most. And people may be surprised that the least interesting of the three I'm going to talk about is Ghost of Tsushima, which I've not played that much of so far, about an hour and a half, possibly two, and it's lovely, but it's pretty generic. So far, at least. I think from the feelings I get, it develops in a little bit more depth and complexity as you go on. So far, it's kind of very similar to all those open-worldy type games that they have a strong theme, and then they have a very large map with various things dotted about them. But thankfully, at the moment, it's kind of going from village to village where there's a very strong sense of direction. The only thing is, it's doing what it does very, very smoothly. It's very slick. Presentation is off the charts. It has a kind of quite believable Japanese kind of atmosphere and feeling to it, although I don't know, there's some issues with the story on that perspective, but I'll come to them in the future when I've played it a bit more. Probably talking about it too much already for how much I've played, but it seems okay, but I've not been completely gripped by it so far. Alright, but not amazing. Looks very pretty. So that's the first one, yeah.
But my takeaway from what I've seen of Ghost of Tsushima, I can't say words, that's what I'm like at times. We worked out I can't say still properly. It sounds like I'm talking about the metal rather than standing still. But there we go. And I can't say coal either. But anyway, Ghost of Tsushima is another one. But it strikes me as a typical end of generation game whereby that they've absolutely ripped out as much as they can of the visuals. It just looks absolutely outstanding. They've pushed the system to the limit, and that masks what is otherwise a fairly generic experience. And there's not much left they can do with open worlds in their current form. And that's what it's looked like to me, and that's what I've been hearing from quite a few of the voices I trust when it comes to listening to them about games. It doesn't stop me wanting to play it. I still really, really do want to play it, but it's not the second coming that it was kind of being hyped up to be at one point.
That's my impression so far, but I will hold off until I've played it some more. But that's where we are with it so far. What have you been playing?
Lots of little odds and ends, as I got a new up-to-date PC, which has allowed me to play games I've not been able to play properly before. So lots of little odds and ends as I tinker with settings and stuff like that. But then Tetris, because I'd like to say that I've been playing a really old version of Tetris just because I've got all this horsepower now. That's what I'm going to do. But I've actually been playing Tetris Effect on the PC, and I've written an article that people can check out on the site, and I'll link to it in the description, that talks about my love for Tetris and especially Tetris Effect. And it is such a wonderful game. It's hard to think that when I first played Tetris in 1989 on the Game Boy in two colours, but it was monochromatic, it just had like tinny music to it, but iconic music, that it could still surprise me and it could still do something new. even after Tetris 99 and turning it into a battle royale, it's like, oh my god, what can they do next? Mizuguchi, again, I'm butchering the name, I know I am. Then, who's of Rez and Lumine's fame, produced just something amazing. I can't even find the right words for it. Just something that's otherworldly, that takes you to another world. The mix of the visuals along with the well-known and well-worn gameplay, which even then adds a couple of nice little tweaks to it at the right time in the right modes. That mixed with the music, I honestly, the first time I played this on the PS4, I cried. It just hit me everywhere. And it wasn't sort of like crying because it was sad or just even tears of joy. It hit me emotionally and I just didn't know how to take it, that I cried. And I've been playing it like ever since. It's my go-to game now whenever I feel I need to escape properly. We'll get to more about games and their role in a little bit when we talk about the mental health side. But yeah, Tetris Effect is just the most beautiful game I've ever played. And honestly, it could do more, I think, or just as much for mental health than just taking medication can do, because you get to a point where it's almost meditative with it, and with headphones on and focused on that screen, nothing else matters when you play it. And that is just a very hard feeling to get across properly until you've experienced it. And the only thing I've not done with this version, I've not played it in VR yet. I will do one day, and from my understanding, in VR, it takes it just to a whole nother level. But yeah, I've been playing that, and it is just the best thing ever.
Well, those kind of sensory experiences, you say, are so important, because if you think about when people have connectivity issues, or they have some mental health issues that are ostracizing them from the world and from themselves even, things like, going on a roller coaster or having pet therapy or any connection to an experience or feeling that wouldn't be in the normal run of events, can have such a wonderful impact on their lives and their mental state. And for Tetris Effect, obviously it probably won't have the same impact on everybody, but for those that it does, it's something they can connect with, like you said, anytime that they want. Kind of like, having a loving pet in a way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I totally get that if you make that connection with it, then it's got the potential to be a life-changing experience, and only for the better.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, this isn't pork begging by any stretch of the imagination. The only reason it is not my most played game at the moment, and why that still goes to Tetris 99, is purely format based. That I need to either get the TV back, or I need to go and sit at the PC to play. If it was on the Switch, I'd be on it more than anything else. Honestly, it is that damn good. Again, if people haven't tried it and they're looking for an experience, yeah, just do it. Just get it. Splash out. It's about, I think you can get it for about 25 to 30 quid on most systems these days, and it's well worth it.
Yeah. Most people should give it a go at the very least, yeah. So, apart from Ghost of Tsushima, I've also been playing a game called Panzer Paladin. I won't go into detail. I'll talk about that more next week. But just to say, if you like arcade action games from the past, 2D style, it's got a NES visual style to it, and lots of 16-bit action platform, not tropes, but, aspects of gameplay, but taken to kind of the next level and linking together in really clever ways. Oh, pick it up. It's a great game for that. If you like anything like Mega Man, the original Castlevanias, any games like that, really, then it's going to be for you. So I'll go into detail, another time. But yeah, definitely go for that. It's a fantastic game. So on Steam at the moment, I think it's coming to Switch plus other platforms down the line.
So just quickly with regards to that, you mentioned obviously if you enjoyed things like Mega Man and Castlevania, is it a love letter to those, or is it really its own thing still? Because I've seen the comparisons, but I'm still unsure whether it's like its own thing or whether it's just trying to be an homage.
It's right on the cusp. We've talked about games like this in the past, and I would describe them in the same way I did then. It's almost as if you're travelling back to a point in time where, the 32-bit era didn't happen, and instead of getting CD-based games and polygons, the consoles that existed just carried on and just got more and more powerful. So it's like, a 16-bit game of the power of, say, the Neo Geo, but with the visuals of an NES. So, broadly, it's much of an homage, but it's got enough in there in the way that its systems interact and how much it uses the amount of RAM that modern machines have to make it a progression. I wouldn't say it's a huge leap forward by any stretch of the imagination. It's not like, say Dead Cells, but it's it's got enough of its own character, both visually and mechanically, to bring enough new people in. Maybe, I don't know. It's always going to be niche. Yeah. If you don't like, I think an easy way of saying is flip it a little bit and say, if you don't like those kind of games, it won't bring anything new that you'll enjoy. It's got enough tweaks on that formula to make it worthwhile for people who already like it, but I don't think it would make any converts from people who didn't like that kind of gameplay anyway.
That's fair enough.
And finally, the most important one is Death Stranding on the PC. Now, this obviously had the PS4 release, and it was exclusive to that on the console, and it's come to PC finally about 8 months late. And what a weird game! So if you're talking about open world games doing something different and not just being an end of generation, here are the visuals maxed out but with the gameplay dialed down to 1 on the dial, this one takes individuality up to 11. It's one of those kind of games. So I'm sure everybody knows what it is by now, but basically you're a courier in a post-apocalyptic world where the world of the dead has collided with the world of the living, and it's connected in lots of different ways. And it just makes this utterly unique landscape. That's kind of like Iceland. It's very kind of barren but green. It's like a desert but without sand. It's got lots of hills and mountains and streams and rivers and rocks that are kind of desolate, as if the moon and the earth collided, just like it's talking about the world of the dead and the living colliding. And you've got to traverse it, delivering parcels. And it really leans into that whole thing of it's about traversal, it's about logistics. And mechanically, it kind of feels a bit like Shadow of the Colossus in places. So you have to grip and hold on, and you have to adjust the weight of your body and the weight of what you're carrying so that you can, achieve what you're going to do. And it sounds like it would be absolutely terrible, and I think some people have found it absolutely terrible because it's completely Marmite. But it's captured me in a way that a game hasn't captured me this year, maybe for a few years, maybe since Breath of the Wild. And I think it's because it picks the perfect time to amp things up. So, like, you start control of a game, and you're walking, and then you run, and you see how much that brings to traversing where you are, and you're like, yep, good. And then just as you get bored of that, it brings in, here's a power suit so that you lose less stamina when you're running. And that's like after about an hour or something, and you're like, oh, great. And then that feels completely invigorating, both to you and your avatar. And then an hour after that, just as you're reaching the limits of what the power suit can do, it gives you a bike, like a motorbike. So you're flying around the country, and then when you're reaching the limits of that, and the stones are getting in the way, the rocks and the mountains, you're given a van, and then you can put all the heavy stuff in the back of that and just drive off. And it keeps ramping it up like that and giving you these new ways to interact that just open up the world so that you're not repeating the same sort of steps of of traversal with your on foot, or just using the bike. It constantly changes them, and it's clever enough to bring them in, but without one of them nullifying another. So you're still always going to need that power suit. You're still going to need to fabricate new boots to walk in because they wear down. One thing won't take away from the other. You can't drive a truck up a mountain. You can't, ford a stream with it. You can't do, there's all sorts you can't do.
Just to interrupt, because I'll forget this afterwards. But you mentioned about needing to sort of make new boots because they wear down. Now, the problem I have with any system like that is how often you need to do that. Is it taken away from the gameplay experience, or is it one of those things where you go, oh, after a bit, my boots have now worn down, I'm going to need to get a new pair?
For me, it gets the timing of all these things right. Your mileage may vary, but for me, it's not like crafting. They're all fabricated by a single process. Without getting into the mechanics too much, because it might put people off and bore them, but basically you need materials to fabricate stuff. So it's a push of a button, but you need to have the materials in the background. Now you can collect them from the environment, things like crystals and metals and things like that, but you get so many from your rewards for deliveries and also from bringing different areas of the map onto the network that you're creating, like a phone network, that you don't really need to do that. So certainly on the difficulty level I'm playing on, you don't need to go around grabbing stuff very often at all, and your boots don't wear out very quickly, and when they do, you just hit a button and it will give them you. So it's more a case of just before you set out on an expedition, just checking everything and making sure you've got everything you need logistically, and then doing it, rather than, oh shit, I'm halfway there and now I can't complete the mission, I've got to reload my save.
So it's not Breath of the Wild annoying.
Well, I mean, I didn't get annoyed by that in Breath of the Wild, but I know people did, so that's fair enough. But no, it doesn't break things. That things do not have the limited shelf life that they did in Breath of the Wild. No, but that said, if you weren't a big fan of Breath of the Wild, you definitely won't like this, because it's a very singular experience. It relies upon, and this is the last thing I'll say because I'm running so long on this, but it relies on the joy of discovery, and the only way it can give you that, for it to have the right impact, is having a lot of, not mediocrity, but similarity, sameness. So you have to walk, and it can feel like a long time, but it's never more than about 10 minutes, and normally only about 5. Yeah. So you'll have 5 or 10 minutes of just traversing a landscape that looks very, very similar, and then you'll hit a wall, literally, in the form of a cavern or a crevasse or a mountain. You'll traverse that, you'll manage to fight your way over it, and then you'll see a beautiful new landscape, a waterfall, a wonderful piece of technology that blends into the environment really well, and you'll have that burst of sort of excitement and joy of discovery, and also that you can go in there and most likely going to get given a fantastic new toy to play with as well that will make the journey back easy or fast. So yeah, I mean, mechanically I love the way that works, but most importantly, it's a story about connecting people. So it's about bringing life and togetherness in a world of death, and that makes it sound very sad, and it has got a really sad, melancholic strands going all the way through it constantly, but also it has the joy of connecting with people and reconnecting people physically as well as emotionally, and it does that very cleverly, and typical Kojima style, it overdoes it, and there's too much text, too many cutscenes, and he over explains, but the core of it, the emotional core of it, really, really works. So yeah, I'm just again, I keep saying this is the last thing we're going to say, but this really is. I don't often go on about graphics, but oh my god, the graphics in this are absolutely phenomenal on the PC. It's an old, a previous gen game, but oh man, you can barely get your head around how good they are. They're just it's on another level. So yeah,
I booted this up for about probably the idea was to boot up this game and get past the Kojima opening cinematic, because I had a spare 2 hours, and to my surprise I actually got to control Norman Reedus very, very early. I was like, oh, okay, I get to actually control the character. What's this all about? Which he actually seems to have learnt some lessons with his opening pacing to a degree. And yeah, it is gorgeous. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's one of the nicest games I think I've ever seen in terms of visual fidelity.
Yes. Yeah.
However, your description of it as well makes it sound like Britain in 2020 rather than a far-flung fantasy future. And because I never thought I'd actually get round to playing it ever, purely because it didn't look my sort of game. So I watched a bunch of videos on it, watching other people play it, just looking at the gameplay mechanics, and the way it came across to me initially, and I can't wait to watch more of it, to play more of it. Sorry, now. Is that it looked like Kojima one day at Konami was maybe feeling quite depressed and sat down, stuck on the TV, eating a bunch of cheese, happened upon Postman Pat, fell asleep and just had the weirdest nightmare. And that's what the game felt like to me when I was seeing video of it. I'm waiting for a little Welsh boy to go and set fire to something accidentally and him have to save him.
Yeah. No, it won't. It's not going to appeal to everyone, and I think it's underperformed as well at retail, which is very unfortunate, but also understandable. And it's the reason why, Konami kept kicking Kojima's ass to turn the Phantom Pain into something a bit more immediate and to just have very skippable, very short cutscenes and have a lot of the dialogue and the background being overlaid on your traversal to an objective rather than as a separate huge lump and unit that you do before you're even playing any kind of game. And I've said elsewhere that I think it's a bit of a shame that he hasn't learned that lesson, because you get huge chunks just dumped on you of unnecessary exposition, and it does get very boring.
I think there's a conversation to have around Kojima. And as someone who's never really been enamoured by his games in the past, I still believe he is one of the most important creators, not only in video games, but in entertainment today. And I think we'll have a separate discussion about that. But yeah, needless to say, he's not afraid to take risks where other developers, publishers, anyone are scared. And he does push the mediums forward. He may not learn his lessons, but he does push boundaries, and people like him are needed. But I think we'll have a more in-depth discussion special about him. I believe might be worthwhile doing.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So yeah, I say aside from me, Tetris is pretty much it. So we're going to move on to a bit of a commentary stroke bit of mental health chat, and it kind of all links in. So if you've never heard of Joe Rogan, I'm pleased for you. He's divisive, shall we say. He's apparently he's a comedian, but he's mainly well known for having his own podcast and doing commentary on MMA stuff. He's a low-rent Alex Jones, if there is such a thing. I mean, that's scraping beyond the bottom of the barrel if there's a low-rent version of Alex Jones. But anyway, he's a bit of a mouthpiece. And recently he decided to make some comments about video games. And to give a bit of context, this is what he said.
And video games are a real problem. They're a real problem. You know why? Because they're fucking fun.
Addictive.
And you don't. Yeah. Well, I have a real problem with them. And you do them, and they're real exciting, but you don't get anywhere.
Right.
It's like you could do like martial arts, right? You could learn jiu-jitsu. You get obsessed by jiu-jitsu, and then 3 years later, you're like an elite jiu-jitsu athlete. You're entering in competitions. You're a purple belt.
You're moving up.
Yeah, you're doing well. Right. You're thinking like, I might be able to open my own school one day.
You got confidence.
Yeah, if I have 100 students and those 100 students are paying me X amount of dollars per month, I can make a living. Holy shit, I can have this would be amazing. And then you see your jiu-jitsu school, and your jiu-jitsu instructor has all these students and drives a Mercedes, and he's got a nice family, and like, that's the future. This way you're doing something exciting and fun, and you don't. Or you could just be playing fucking video games. 3 years later, you could be that same kid just playing video games, waiting for the next whatever the fuck game is, next Xbox game to come out, and you're gonna waste your time.
So, I've got a few issues with this. I actually listened to it a couple of times, and one of my first thoughts to this was maybe he was trying to say one thing and it came across incorrectly, because he says video games are fun, and I believe he does play video games. And then I listened to it again, and no, I don't think he's mistaken in what he's trying to say in his own views. He believes video games are a waste of time. And it got me to thinking, what is a waste of time? Why is it all of a sudden not okay to waste your time on something, if indeed video games are a waste of time? I spoke about Tetris earlier in the show, and by all intents and purposes, it is a waste of time. I'm sitting there, I'm dropping blocks into a well to clear lines and do it over and over and over and over, and it is a waste of time. I'm not doing anything with it. It's not enhancing me in terms of skills, possibly, or, future endeavours. But at the same time, it is. As I said, it's an escapism from me. It's a game that has literally saved my life at times, that has stopped me wanting to take my own life, that has given me a reason for being at times, as sad as that can sound to some people. If that does that, it's not a waste of time. And the other thing he said is, if you do something like jiu-jitsu, surprisingly something he's really into his mixed martial arts, that apparently if you do jiu-jitsu, then you might get better at jiu-jitsu. You might then decide to start your own studio. So that's not a waste of time, it's a skill, is what he says. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't walk through town without jiu-jitsu studios all over the place. It's literally coffee shop, jiu-jitsu studio, coffee shop, takeaway, jiu-jitsu studio, jiu-jitsu studio. I don't know about you, Stu. What's it like in the Northwest? Loads of jiu-jitsu studios?
It's more karate and kung fu, but yeah, no, it's...
Yeah, obviously I'm being a bit facetious there. But it is ludicrous, the idea that because jiu-jitsu teaches you to fight and teaches you a lot of good disciplines, don't get me wrong, I tried kickboxing when I was younger and I learned some very interesting disciplines with it. So I think they're well worth doing. I'm not going to suddenly crap on what he likes because it's Joe Rogan. I think there's lots of benefits to anything you do that learns you a new skill. But people play video games, and do you know the people who make those video games? Do you know why they got into making video games, Stu? Go on, I'll let you guess this one. Why do you think they got into making video games? What could have led to that?
Well, I'm guessing that it's because they wanted to find a route to jiu-jitsu, but they couldn't.
Exactly, spot on. They went to the jiu-jitsu studio and they started making video games. But no, they started by playing video games. Obviously not the very earliest creators. That they came from wanting to find something new. And I'm sure there's an interesting story as to how someone even came up with the very first idea of a video game. But most developers now got into it because they've played a video game and they were inspired by it. And as a medium, it's moved on. It's the same as people who make films. They got into it because they watched films. Writers, they read books. They wanted to create. And that's what video games do. They allow people to do that. Now, unlike something like jiu-jitsu or karate or a specific skill that you learn, you play a video game, you can be inspired to do anything else. I know... when I was younger, and I was inspired by the visuals of certain video games. And the very first time I saw Wipeout and the graphic design around Wipeout, that was me. I knew I wanted to be a graphic designer at that age. I know people that have played Echo, and they wanted to study marine biology because they was fascinated by it. And so video games are such a vast space, and it's the same, I think, with movies and things like that. Such a vast space that they allow you to then follow or understand a passion that you might then not previously have known. So to say video games specifically are a waste of time really did rub me up the wrong way, because they bring out other aspects that aren't a waste of time. They do increase knowledge because they plant that seed. And because they're interactive, you're more engaged with them than I think any other medium as well. And again, that's not to dump on a great high on movies and TV and books. I think they're all important. But there's something about that added level of interaction that makes things stick. There's a reason why when you do a project at school where you've actually got to do something, you learn more than when you just sat there with a teacher talking to you. So, yeah, it's something that really rubbed me up the wrong way because he was just so dismissive over it. So it's kind of... I'm pissed off that someone like Joe Rogan says what he says, but also I'm glad he says what he says because it allows us all to then go, actually, no, that's not what it is. It's a weird rant. What are your thoughts on what he said?
Yeah, so there's two sort of big things, one negative, one positive. So the negative thing is where he's coming from is a very particular mindset, and it belongs to a very unfortunate train of thought. I'm picking my words very carefully here.
Yeah.
There is a train of thought that anything that you do has to have benefit to either yourself or to others. And traditionally, I think authorities and people in power have promoted things like, sport and exercise because it can be said to help the individual and the state at the same time, because a healthy mind is a healthy body and all of that stuff. And also it's the anti-intellectual thing of art is a waste of time, creativity is a waste of time because they don't contribute and they can't be monetized. And of course, anyone in their right mind knows that that's complete rubbish. That, as you said, when you engage with play in any form, whether that's board games or whether playing sport with your mates or whether it's playing video games or whether it's, anything like that, you're freed from the constant need to produce, to have an end result, or to be productive. It's non-productivity that frees your expression. And like you said, it makes you consider a wider world and consider other people's perspectives, because that's what intellectual pursuits are. They're disengaging from the things that are about the physical and the immediate needs, which is why sport is one that transcends all boundaries, because people who are intellectuals enjoy it because it's an expression, and people who are anti-intellectual enjoy it because it's purely a physical objective and manifestation.
Yeah.
So but to call somebody's time spent painting a flower a waste of time, or playing Death Stranding that is saying what somebody feels about the positivity of humanity when literal death is upon them. To call that a waste of time completely obliterates the worth of people and the worth of empathy and shared experience. And it's a very anti-intellectual stance. So that's how I feel about it from that point of view. Also, from the positive point of view, sort of building on what I was saying about Death Stranding there, yeah, storytelling, whether it's done in a visual way or in film and TV and games, or whether it's in novels or through painting, has this this wonderful way of linking people together. It both connects us and gives us views of shared experiences, but at the same time, knowing that experience was similar but different, it teaches us. And without that inner life and without those expressions of ourselves, we don't exist as a society. Joe Rogan relies upon people being creative. He doesn't understand this. He thinks that what he does and his thoughts, and ironically his thoughts, and what he does to be productive are all that matters. It's a singular viewpoint that's been narrowed down into a completely utilitarian, self-fulfilling stance that doesn't recognise the value of other people. And he's as much a victim as a perpetrator when it comes to this, as so many of these people are. But if he could just understand that the things that he loves come from the passion of other people as well and their creativity, I think the world would be a better place.
Yeah, again, what's interesting is, and again, I always feel like I'm really dumping on other mediums when I talk about it in this way. It's really not. I just think there's something very unique about video games. And spoiler ahead if you haven't played the original Last of Us. Joel chooses love over the betterment of the wider world, and that made me question my own morality. Would I sacrifice my children for the betterment of the world? And I don't know.
It is a great one. Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah.
Part of me wants to go, no, do you know what? I wouldn't sacrifice my children for the betterment of the world, to save mankind. I wouldn't do it. But that is so incredible. There is no mankind. What future is there for my children if I don't sacrifice my children? And, you get those questions. And to then just bottle that down to video games are a waste of time. It really, really isn't. But to do what Joe Rogan did and boil down something that he likes into the most simplest form, kicking someone in the head repeatedly, that doesn't better your life. That doesn't lead to anything. That doesn't make you think. In fact, it makes you think less. Now, I know that jiu-jitsu and any other martial art isn't about just kicking someone in the head repeatedly until they get concussion. I know it isn't that, but if we want to boil it down and take out all the nuances, then that's what Joe Rogan does. That's what he likes. He just likes people who kick each other in the head until they can't think anymore. So, it's how you look at it. And it just really gets me that these people who do it, and it's not just them, you are right, they are a victim of previous ideas, and they've had it like rubbed into them. It's the same people who call masks muzzles and refuse to wear them off, again, taking out the people who actually physically can't, either autism or they've got physical disabilities or anything like that. I get that, but the people who are like, no, it's my freedom, you're taking away my civil liberties and stuff like that,
I know,
but they've had that thrown at them, and I can't blame them. It's not them, it's the way they've been told things. Don't listen to the government, listen to the government. Don't listen to the experts because they're wrong. Now listen to the experts, but don't listen to the experts, to us. Vote for us, don't vote for them. By the way, we're sending you mixed messages. People just get confused, and that's what these is. I think it's the same with people like Joe Rogan. They're confused. They've believed everything they've been told, but now they've got a platform, and they're spreading their misinformation as well. I don't dislike Joe Rogan. In fact, I know it's never going to happen, but I'd love to sit down and have a debate over this with Joe Rogan, have a chat with him about it, because I think he does have some interesting points on other things he said. I just think on this he's very, very wrong.
I think you could honestly change his mind in an afternoon, because what makes me really sad is when he was a child, he'll have run around and played games. He'll have played games with his friends, made up worlds. He'll have, played with toys and played board games and had this rich inner life that his family, well, maybe, but definitely like his teachers will have encouraged, and something has gone wrong along the way to make him think that his adult point of view that has changed from his childlike point of view is the right one, and it's all about being productive. And I think if somebody could just reconnect him to those feelings that he had when he was younger, he might just completely change his mind on this. And the problem is not really in the individual carrying these misconceptions. It's sad, but that's not the problem. The problem is that he has a wide platform to say all of these things, and he's choosing to say something that alienates people and that is negative, and just dismissing them in this way and invalidating them is to no value and can only hurt people. So
but no, that's it. I mean, I don't think we've come into definitive points here. It's just one of those weird things, like someone's decided to open their mouth and not know what they're talking about, just like we do every week.
Definitely. I think the last thing I'd say on the point as a whole is that anyone who tries to say this is the end, this is the point at which we all have to agree, that's when the trouble starts, because nobody's ever going to agree. You have to keep learning, you have to keep your mind open, and you have to keep exploring, and trying to put a cap on that always causes terrible problems.
So yeah, on that, don't question us on what we've just said.
God, no.
Okay, we're right.
Yeah.
We are 100% right.
I've got my Gestapo ready to come out and get you if you try and disagree with me.
But yeah, that's the end of it. I know next week you want to talk about your work situation and stuff like that, so we'll get onto that next week. But as usual, just to finish off, if you like what we're saying and you want to discuss things with us, if you want to debate what we said today, join us on our Discord channel. The link's on the site and via the description to wherever you're listening to this. Also, check out Mates. It's a mental health group on Facebook, and they offer different voices and help and support, various different activities, all based around mental health. Do check them out, because what they do, I think, is really, really good. But yeah, we're on Twitter. If you like what we do and you want to help out, then you can support us on Ko-fi or Patreon. And until next week, I've been Brad. I've been joined by Stu. Stay safe.